Invite your attention to the book of Exodus, chapter 3. The book of Exodus, chapter 3. This morning, while you're turned there, I'd like to thank Brother Glenn. He got our sound booth, and Miss Becky came and got that open on both sides, so don't lean against one of the end walls, you might fall out. But it's more accessible now, and appreciate that. Appreciate Curtis coming to do some weed eating and all it's done for the church. Appreciate those of you. Miss Margaret bought Brother Dave Powell brought a mop that's been helpful to the church. So appreciate all that you do for the church, and thankful to serve with God's people who are willing to serve and get compliments all the time about you guys and how great a job you did at the state meeting. Still getting compliments, so I appreciate you and thank you. While you're turning to Exodus chapter 3, went to the funeral yesterday. Brother Clive Gregg was a pastor up in Michigan and also Indiana. He served did mission work up there in Indiana and served the church in Michigan as well. And passed away, good godly man. And his son did the funeral. Brother Davis said one time they were at we were at the same ADA meeting in Springfield, Illinois, one year. And after, in between the meeting, go get something to eat, and they had a little place there, and he went in the Subway. And his dad said always before he would eat, he would take his dentures and wrap them up and stick them in his coat pocket, at the meeting. So his dad got up to go get something, not really realizing he pulled his hand out of his pocket, and not realizing his teeth fell out. And when they went across the room, went under this table. David said, I had to go over there. He said, you know how awkward it is to go up to somebody's table and said, I think my dad's teeth are under your table. He said, but if you got a parent and they are alive, then talk to them. Amen. And he said, there was always questions I wanted to ask my dad. Can't do it anymore. Always wanted to find out more, ask him more, and talk to him and write down things, and he's gone. So be thankful for your parents. Exodus chapter 3 this morning, when you can't, he can. When you can't, he can. That's the title of the message. We begin verse 1. It says, Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why this bush is not burnt. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereupon thou standest is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of the taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land into a good land and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, and unto the place of the Canaanites, and the Hivites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is coming to me. I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppressed them. Come now therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. And Moses said unto God, Who am I that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, Certainly I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, ye shall serve God upon this mountain. And Moses said unto God, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The God of your fathers hath sent me unto you, and they shall say to me, What is thy name? And what shall I say unto them? And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. And God said moreover unto Moses, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, The Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, hath sent me unto you, and this is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations. Have you ever stopped to think how the disciples felt when Jesus asked them to spread the gospel to the world? Have you ever thought about how Jonah felt when God called him to go to Nineveh to preach? Or have you ever thought about the Apostle Paul, how he felt when the Lord asked him to take the gospel to the Gentiles? How do you think John the Baptist felt when God sent him to be the forerunner of Jesus and to baptize him? How do you think I felt when God called me to preach or to start a church in Calera? And one word would describe it: inadequate. Inadequate. We've all experienced feelings of inadequacy before. Some may try to hide it. Some try to disguise or hide. They may appear like, well, I'm self-sufficient, or I can handle anything, or I'm strong. But every one of us has felt inadequate at some point in our life. You know, maybe when our first child is born, maybe when we take on a new job, maybe when we take on a job at church, we might feel inadequate. We might feel, well, I just can't do this. And we feel that way sometimes. Sometimes you feel like you don't measure up, that you're not capable to do a particular task. You feel insufficient in who you are and by what you can do. Then you have experienced that feeling of inadequacy. There are a number of reactions that people have, and some get angry, some get resentful toward God when they feel inadequate. Others are embarrassed or humiliated by it, and still others experience weakness and fear, and others just want to give up. Well, I'm just going to quit. I'm just going to give up. I can remember when I was 24 years old. I know that's a long time ago. That's half of my age. I was called to my first pastor my first church. Most of the people in the church had been saved 2 or 3 times or more longer than I had been alive. They were well learned in God's Word. I had no pastoral experience. No wife, no family. Amy and I were dating, but not married. No idea what I was doing. Needless to say, I felt inadequate. I felt that there was no way I could really do this. I wanted to do it, but I felt inadequate, and I was scared and intimidated. And God showed me a very important truth from His Word, and it was this: you can't, but I can. We can't, but God can. Listen, this is exactly how Moses felt when God called him. I want you to deliver my people from Egypt. And Moses was raised in Egypt by, the famous story how he was pulled from the river. Listen, God had a plan with his life. God had a purpose with his life. God had a power on his life that he didn't even probably know about until now. But God had all these things working in his life, and he said, look, I want you. Moses killed a man. He thought, well, this will disqualify me. I can't do anything for God because one of his people will be mistreated. So what does he do? He fled to Midian for 40 years. How long do you think he can run from God? 40 years? That's enough time? He married Zipporah, and he was keeping flocks for father-in-law Jethro when God appeared to him. God used a burning bush. Moses is walking along and he sees this burning bush. He said, I will turn aside now. I think that's probably more like, I think I will turn aside now. I don't think that language just quite captures what he did. But he probably like, whoa, there's this bush burning, but it's not consumed. And God instructs him, take off your shoes, you're on holy ground. So God then tells Moses that he has seen and heard the affliction of his people. And Moses knew about it. He had been there. Listen, that's why he killed the guy, because he was mistreating his people. Now God said, here, I got a plan. Moses said, I'm listening. So God begins to tell the plan, and the plan involves Moses, and Moses said, I'm not listening. You lost me back there when you said me. And Moses felt inadequate. He felt like, well, I just can't do this. And God said, I'll send you, Moses, unto Pharaoh, that you'll bring my people. What was his reaction? What would your reaction be? We would probably feel inadequate. Why me, Lord? Today I want to look at who inadequacy affects and why it exists, and how can we overcome it. First of all, we see the reality of it. The feeling of being inadequate is universal. It affects all ages. It is certain that we will experience. We see that God's call, when God called Moses, he was 80 years old. Okay, he's just getting started, 80. So those of you think you're too old, hey, knock that out the window. 80, just get going, okay? He's been in Midian for the past 40 years, shepherding and farming. He was in a comfort zone, you know? I mean, just think, he's in the last part of his life. He's probably like, well, you know, I'm in retirement, I'm on cruise control. They showed the guy at the ball game last night. I don't know if you watched that. He's 99 years old. You see that guy? He's a sports writer. 99. You look like maybe 65. Great shape. He could say, well, you know, I watch it from home and something. No. Listen, we could give up and quit, but listen, when God calls Moses, he feels powerless to do the job that God wants him to do. God needed to deliver, and he said, you're the deliverer. And he's thinking, not me, Lord. Listen, God often calls those who feel inadequate to do things that seem impossible. God called a little boy named David to throw a stone, a 9'6" giant. Marissa says she got her stool this week. She says she's over 9 feet tall, 9'6". Is that what she said? I said, well, you're about as big as Goliath, you know. Tall as Goliath. A little boy with a rock that hit him in one spot that would kill him. It's not a coincidence. God called a scared farmer to defeat the Midianites in Gideon. God called a harlot to get Israel's spies safely in and out of Jericho. God called some fishermen, a zealot, a tax collector to carry the gospel around the world. Listen, God often calls those who seem inadequate. So you say, well, I feel inadequate. Well, guess what? You're all ready to go then. You're all ready to go for God, because that's what it takes to serve God. That's who God calls. God can't use the person full of themselves. He can't use them at all. We see only God's call, but then we see Moses' answer. Because he felt inadequate, Moses began to make excuses. I know we wouldn't do that, but here's what he did. He began to convince God that he had the wrong man. You ever tried to bargain with God and convince God that he made a mistake? Convince God that he had the wrong man? Well, he has 5 excuses. Listen, an excuse, somebody says, is first cousin to a lie. So, in verse 11, he says, and Moses said to God, who am I that I should go into Pharaoh, that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? Lord, I'm not powerful, I'm not famous. Why should I go before Pharaoh? So the Lord quashed that excuse, and he said, I'll be with you. Moses is going. Well, excuse number 2. Verse 13, he said, and Moses said to God, behold, when I come up to him and shall say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me, then, and they ask, what's his name? What shall I say? And he said, I don't have all the answers. God told him to tell Pharaoh that I am had sent you. He's the one who sent you. Tell him the one who was, and the one who is, and the one who shall be. That's the one, the all-powerful one, the everlasting one. That's the one that sent you. Not again. So Moses has, he gets creative. He's going to have to work at this, God's pretty good at this. So chapter 4, verse 1. And Moses answered and said, but behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto me. Well, they will say, the Lord has not appeared unto thee. I can tell them I am something, but they're not going to believe me. Why in the world should they believe me? You see, his feelings of inadequacy was shifting into overdrive. And he is saying, what if? And he's at the what if. You ever do the what if? He's worrying and he's fretting because why? He feels inadequate. And God's answer to excuse number 3, listen, he was to give Moses 3 signs that he could perform. He would have the rod that would turn into a snake. That'd be pretty cool, right? The rod, and throw it down, it becomes a snake. What about picking it back up? You thought about that? By the way, one of our missionaries, Chase Reynolds, in Indonesia, got bit by a snake. I don't know if it's venomous or not, but they're having to fly into Australia. or treatment. So remember him in prayer. Mention that in it. But a snake, he said, and then he would use the leper's hand. His hand would be leprous, and all of a sudden it would be clean again. And then he would have the ability to turn the water into blood. In other words, Moses, you can count on my power to back up your words. When you speak to Pharaoh, you won't just be speaking words. Listen, you'll be going in my power. You'll be able to do things that you can't do without me. And you will know that it's me, and you'll know that I'll be with you, and you can trust in the power of God. Wow. This guy just keeps going. But you know how stubborn we can be, right? Mankind. So Moses tells God and informs God in verse 10. And Moses said unto the Lord, O my Lord, I'm not eloquent, neither hitherto nor since thou hast spoken to thy servant, but I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue. Well, he said, I got him on this one. I'm not qualified. I'm not adequate. I'm inadequate to speak or represent you or deliver your children. I'm slow of speech. I'm slow of tongue. The Lord told Moses that, listen, that he said, well, he said, I'll sit there and go eat. Now, everything that he comes up with, every excuse, why is he coming up with them? He feels inadequate. Why do we do the things we do? We feel inadequate. Well, God, I couldn't serve you in this area. God, I can't do this. Or God, I can't. That's something new. That's something I can't do these things. But the Lord told Moses, he said that he would go and help him. Aaron would go and help him. Here goes excuse number 4 after my number. So he tries one more time. Verse 13, 14 of chapter 4. And he said, O my Lord, send me, I pray thee, by the hand of him whom I will send. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. And he said, Is not Aaron thy Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well, and also, behold, he cometh forth to meet thee. When thou seest, be glad in his heart. And basically he says, why don't you get somebody else? Why don't you get Aaron? Why don't you get somebody who's more qualified, who's a good speaker, who has people skills? The Lord said to Moses, you're my choice. But I'll send Aaron to go with you. He can do the speaking, but I'm sending you. Listen, feeling inadequate at some point in life is certain. You may feel inadequate as a husband, as a father, wife, or mother. You may feel inadequate to learn a new job, inadequate to deal with some physical, emotional, or mental problem. You may feel inadequate to stop an addiction or bad habit. Listen, you are not alone. Everyone experiences feelings of inadequacy sometimes. I was listening to, I watch sometimes the First Baptist Gordondale, and Tony Cooper was on there from Jimmy Hill Mission this morning speaking, and there was a guy over there. He said his mother gave to the Jimmy Hill Mission for 40 years. He said, I know she gave, probably not ever thinking that her son would have to go there. And he went there. He had to go there. And listen, we sometimes think, well, you know, he said, even after all of that, I felt like God could, he said, I grew up in church, I got saved at a young age, but I felt that God couldn't use me. Listen, sometimes we feel inadequate, but he went there and he found out, hey, God can use me. And God will use me. So listen, folks, it happens to every one of us. Well, what are the reasons for it? Why do we feel inadequate at times? Why do we go through times of inadequacy? You see, first of all, and this may sound cliche or crutch, but God created us that way. You say, what? God actually made us to feel inadequate. It's not something that is weird or unusual. What would happen? Listen, let me ask you this. What would happen if we never felt inadequate? We'd be proud, stubborn, and lost individuals headed to the devil's hell. If we said, okay, God, I'm self-sufficient. That's why people die and go to hell, because they think that they are adequate. They think they can meet their needs. They think they can save themselves. They think that whatever they want to do, they can do it. Listen, that's what the devil wants us to think. And God created us to do what? To rely upon Him. To rely upon Him. I asked Miss Beverly, I said, Miss Beverly, what's your favorite verse? I was visiting with her this week, and she didn't know much more than her name, but she could say, I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. Philippians 4:13. Listen, that's what it's all about. Through Christ. It is only our inadequacy that we look up to the one who created us and realize, listen, that it's God. And He is over all things. And our inadequacy shows His sovereignty and His power and His purpose with mankind in the universe. And second thing is this, we're created that way because God desires to work through us. He desires to. You say, well, couldn't God, listen, God in all of His power, couldn't He go zap to Pharaoh and his army and they'd be gone? He could have. God chooses to work through people. You understand that? Not people who are full of themselves, not people who are prideful, not people who are skillful. Those who feel inadequate, like you and I sometimes. See, God's desire was to work through Moses, to use Moses as the instrument, not as the deliverer, but the instrument. The human instrument that God desires to use to get the job done. Could God struck down Goliath? Sure He could. But God wanted to use, listen, do you know why God uses the weak and the insufficient feeling people? To show His power. To show the very power of God and what He can do and how He can do it. God could have destroyed Pharaoh with one word, defeated the Egyptians the very day. But listen, His desire was to use people like Moses and David and Gideon and Paul and His disciples and us. In us. You see, He desires to take the inadequate, unqualified, unsuspecting people and to demonstrate His unlimited, unfailing, and unequal power. And if you feel inadequate, listen, join the club. God can use you. He will work through you, and He desires to work through you to bring honor and glory to Himself. To Himself. Now, the third thing, not only show you the reality of it, the reasons for it, but then the reliance it should produce. Our inadequacy is certain, and it's because God created us that way, because He desires for us to fully rely on Him. Rely on Him. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, you probably know what it says. Trust in the Lord with all thy heart. Lean not into thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct thy paths. That means to trust God fully. Do you trust Him fully? So, yeah, I trust God. You trust Him with your family? Trust Him with your finances? Trust Him with your future? Well, look, again. Trust Him fully, entirely, with everything that we have. Everything that we have. You know what? Everything we have belongs to God. Our family. My kids don't belong to me. God just lets me hang around. They belong to Him. And your kids too. Listen, everything we have belongs to God. We have to entrust them to God. Because you know what? We're not adequate to give them what they need, but God is. And sometimes we've got to say, well, I don't have the answer, but God, you do. Not only should we trust Him fully and entirely, but exclusively, nobody else. Nobody else. Listen, you have to trust God. Two things that happen, though. First of all, our inadequacy activates God's power. Moses said, I can't. I'm not qualified. I can't speak. They won't listen to me. Get someone else. Well, God activated and made available His power to Moses. That the Apostle Paul realized God's amazing power. And that he said in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 5, he said that our sufficiency, or, is not in ourselves, but our sufficiency is of God. Paul said after he was saved in Galatians 2:20, I'm crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. The Apostle Paul realized that the power to live the Christian life, the power to serve, the power to speak, the power to live, listen, to move or live or have our being is in God. It's in God. Listen, we find that we're inadequate, but that God is not. And He demonstrates His power. And I love this. Go with me to 2 Corinthians chapter 4. I want you to see this verse. I want you to know this verse. And put this verse in your memory. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7. I used to work in the patio department at Kmart. Yes, I know how to work the job. A preacher friend of mine, he said, what I knew I was called to preach when I woke up on Monday morning, didn't want to work, craving fried chicken. But I know how to work. But I worked in the patio department, and we would get clay pots in. And guess what happened? About one out of every 4 or 5, guess what happened to them? Cracked. But they're so cheap, so they would just, they would make up pay for themselves. We all know how clay pots are. They're real fragile. Kind of like a windshield on a truck. Mine windshield. All right, but listen to what the Lord said. Verse 7, but we have this treasure in earthen vessels. The word earthen vessel means clay pots. What treasure is he talking about? The message of God, the gospel. That the excellency of the power may be of God and not of us. Now, what kind of power does a clay pot have? Nothing at all. You can maybe thump it real hard and crack it. But God chose, listen, earthen vessels, you and I, to take the message of Christ to the world. Somebody as frail and as fragile and as weak and as inadequate as we feel, God chose us to go and take the gospel. Could God have saved the world? Sure He could have. That's why I cannot swallow Calvinism. Because God gives man a free will and a choice. And God wants to use His creation. And God desires. He doesn't force us, but He wants to use us. And so we see that when we feel inadequate, it activates God's power. God began to work in Moses' life. The second thing is this. Inadequacy. Our inadequacy invites God's grace. When the Apostle Paul was given a thorn in the flesh, we don't know what it was, whether it's physical or emotional or mental, whatever it might be. Some say it was his eyesight. I don't know. But it made him feel inadequate at times. The Apostle Paul. You see, I could never imagine him feeling that way. He did. And he prayed 3 times, God, remove this thorn that I have in my flesh. And God chose not to remove it. God did give Paul the sufficient grace to deal with it that he needed. And listen, Paul was able to live his life and serve God, knowing this by the grace of God. Realizing that our inadequacy invites God's grace. That God said, you can't, I'm going to give you my grace, you can do it. You can go through this disease. You can go through this period of your life. You can go through this hard time. You can go through this new job or whatever it is, whatever challenge or whatever obstacle or whatever barrier that you have to go through in life that you realize, hey, I can do this through Christ. And we can't, but He can. Listen, sometimes we may feel inadequate. My dad was crippled. He was born crippled. Does he feel inadequate physically? Sure. Did God take away his crippled leg? No. But God gave him the grace to deal with it. Listen, we can never exhaust the endless well of God's grace. God's grace is sufficient for whatever inadequacy you may feel in your life. And you'll realize, listen, that God's grace is there. And Moses looked back, I'm sure, on the last 40 years of his life, and he saw the grace of God working in his life. And he saw the power of God working in his life. And he saw the plan of God. Sometimes we don't realize when we're going through those things just what God is doing. And God just wants us to trust Him. You have one of those children that want to know everything. Everything. And we say, why are they like that? Well, because we're like that. Right? Because we want to know what's going to happen. You know? We want to know. But sometimes we're not going to know. And we just got to trust. It's the hardest thing that we had to do is to move to an area with my family, 3 little kids, there were little kids in my wife, those 7. And trust God. I mean, I've always trusted God as a minister, you know. I knew that the church would take care of us, but now, hey, there's no church hardly to take care of us. We joined our sponsor church, but hey, we're out here on a limb. And we went by faith and trusted God. Look, did we feel inadequate? Yes. There are times you want to quit? Yes. I can remember one particular Sunday, and every time we sang that song, "You Were My All in All," Curtis. There was one particular Sunday at the clubhouse, I was discouraged. Me and my kids in my way. Made me blade. I could not see. I wept. Felt inadequate. God said, "You can't." We all may feel like that. No matter how long you've been in despair, discouraged, or depressed, the power of God is everywhere. Jesus died for your sins, for your inadequacies and mine. Listen, 3 things in closing this morning that you need to know. Admit your inadequacy. This is initial step toward accepting God's power. Whether you're a drug addict, sex addict, alcoholic, gambler, spouse abuse, hot-headed, worrier, impatient, depressed, disobedient. First step is come clean with God and say, admit, God, that we're powerless. We feel inadequate. We can't deal with this in our life. That's the first step. That's how we all get saved, isn't it? God, I can't save myself. God, I'm not strong enough. God, I'm not good enough. God, I can't do this. I need a Savior. You may be here this morning, you're lost, and you've been struggling through life, and you've been trying to get through life, and you've been trying to get through those